Welcome back to Adam's Everything EV. A lot is new. In fact, this is a new shirt. There's a new background. I've got new shirts available. You can check them out right here. They're a great gift, and they're 25% off for the first 2 weeks. But let's talk about whether or not you should get into Fisker. And yes, there are people that definitely should get into Fisker, and we'll also talk about why one of those people is not me. But before we go any further, we might as well update you on the most current Fisker news. The Tsunami website has a bunch more parts and international shipping has begun, so that's good news. People that have healthy batteries are going to get another opportunity for a 2.2 update. And if you tried to get the 2.2 update previously and it wasn't finished, you'll need a healthy battery and you'll need to jump back into the queue for another try at the update. But the good news is a bunch more people are going to get a crack at getting 2.2. So if your battery meets the criteria set forth by the OTA team, and you're willing to sacrifice your car for a few days and not drive it, and also take the risk of maybe bricking your car in the event that it doesn't work right, then jump in the queue for the 2.2 update. But it's also been made clear that the longer you wait, the more likely it's going to be successful, which is good news for folks in Europe. The cloud goes down January 1st. There's a bunch of confusion about $2.5 million that was used for recalls and $2.5 million, which is a separate sum, but also the same amount, that was used to have access for the license for the Fisker IP. There were no guarantees with either one of those $2.5 million sums that allowed Fisker owners to have access to the cloud even if they didn't join the FOA. So if you didn't sign up as an FOA member, on January 1st, the cloud goes down. And what that means is kind of to be determined because it hasn't happened to anybody yet. Vents are now shipping and fobs are now shipping. So you may be in the early group if you get some soon, but that's good news for folks who have ordered those. Cabin air filters are being worked on as well as brakes. The brakes are in a negotiation phase with a manufacturer, while the air filters are kind of next in the event that there's a bulk order and they decide to go forward with it, but nothing yet. The first rip of windshields has arrived, but more windshields are going to be difficult because there's a shipping issue where they can only ship 7 at a time, and individual windshields kind of double, triple, 4x in cost. So more windshields are on the way, but it looks like kind of 7 at a time, or at least that was what I was able to make from the information I received. The long and short of it is, if you haven't gotten a windshield yet, you may have a longer wait, and the order in which people get windshields is kind of going on how badly your windshield is broken. And so that's at least good for those who do have really poor windshields at the current time. CarPlay and Android Auto doesn't even look like a thing for at least 6 months, and the issue with CarPlay is that it failed MFI, so that's going to need to be sorted one way or another. There's no update on Hagen's Berman right now, but if you want information, you can definitely reach out to them. They're very responsive. Finally, as far as your influence as an owner in the Fisker Owners Association, it's probably going to be a year before any of that makes any difference because there's so much stuff that's already being negotiated and is on the table and must be handled before there's more proposals. And that's your current, up-to-date Fisker news. And in order to successfully talk to you about whether or not you should regret getting rid of yours or whether or not you should buy one if you're looking, the best way to go is to address a very productive comment thread from my most recent Fisker video. We'll start with the initial comment. Now I kinda regret selling my Fisker Ocean One at such a steep loss, as I think the car has, as you rightly say, about 5 years of good usage left now that the FOA has resolved a lot of the open problems. The big questions, though, going forward are insurance, spare parts, and maintenance. As you quite rightly point out, all you need is a cracked windshield that needs replacing, and you'll immediately face problems finding the part. And then how will the recalibration of the electrics in the windshield be done? And one thing you didn't mention is that the FOA is only going to work if the FOA leadership all decide to cooperate and work their butts off to get things operational. But over time, things are going to deteriorate simply because there will be fewer and fewer Fisker Oceans on the road. Plus, there is no guarantee that the leadership will not self-destruct at some point in the future. This comment is extremely well put together and addresses the entirety of the situation very well. I still think you were right to get rid of your Ocean. While the future may look brighter, there are still many risks. For example, no battery warranty, something literally every other EV with an operating manufacturer comes with. These packs are likely high quality, but that doesn't stop them from failing. So, if by chance, and it's definitely a non-zero chance, your battery dies somewhere in the first 100,000 miles, you've got a brick, and it's time to buy a new vehicle, like today. That's a salvage vehicle at that point. And don't talk to me about I'm going to get a battery backup and turn it into something else. It's going to cost more money for you to do that than to pick up another Ocean. So yes, there are some DIY enthusiast things you can do with a Fisker Ocean with a bad battery, just like there are things you can do with a Fisker Ocean that's totaled with a good battery. but those are really expensive. Until that changes, resale values will not increase. And that's just my opinion. Please let me know why you think that's not true down in the comments. I'm definitely excited to hear any rebuttal at all from anyone. Also, people are saying that dropping collision coverage would be a way to mitigate expensive insurance coverage, when all it really does is make 100% of the risk belong to the owner. I know a handful of folks who are out of the ocean and have been made whole because they had gap insurance or new car replacement, and the insurance companies couldn't find a part. And insurance is another huge concern. You cannot register a car that you can't insure, and yes, right now, insurance companies are insuring the vehicles, but there may be a time when that selection of insurance companies that will insure the car may be reduced or disappear altogether. So that's another issue when you own an Ocean. And then, of course, we had some replies. Probably the folks who have made the best out of this situation are the ones who bought these vehicles at a discounted fraction of the original MSRP. Well, their situations are different then, aren't they? Even if you got this vehicle for $20,000, you got a very, very great deal. Those who rushed to sell theirs made a huge mistake, in my opinion, which unfortunately includes you, Adam. If $20,000 or $15,000 cash isn't a lot to have to come up with, I think a Fisker Ocean may be the right product for you, because paying cash is kind of the only way to do it at this point. You're not going to get a loan from basically anyone for a Fisker Ocean. And if you are able to get one, you probably didn't need one in the first place. But it's hard to turn down cheap money. I know. I was a finance major. Yes, there are several features like adaptive cruise control that's not been enabled on the Ocean, but it's only a matter of time before it is. I mean, this vehicle didn't have a brake hold and will roll at stops. That's been fixed. Additional features. What you've got is what you get. Edmunds did a video recently, and as much as they pride themselves on being able to report information to consumers, they didn't report a whole lot about the Fisker Ocean other than the fact that, yes, they bought one, and yes, they also, along with every other person that paid $70,000, lost a lot of money. But they are right about one thing. New features and new updates don't have a high likelihood of ever happening. Homologation is really expensive, and who knows if NHTSA will let an organization full of owners ever homologate a vehicle successfully. It's up to them, at least in the United States. And if it doesn't go through in the United States, you can pretty much expect it not to roll out in Europe. That's another thing. Ownership in Europe is different than ownership in the United States. The bankruptcy went different. The parts supply is different. There is no recall, which means all of the stuff that's required in the United States is not required in Europe. So if you want a water pump, you're going to have to pay for that, even if it's broken and it technically was recalled in the United States. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get the recall in Europe because there isn't one. So in the event they decide to homologate, there could be like a multi-million-dollar cost to homologate this car. We don't know how much it costs, and the owners will definitely pay, and it's not part of the dues, it will be extra. Talking about additional features is something that the FOA not only wants to do, but kind of has to, because they need you to sign on every quarter in order for them to continue as an organization. So Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, that's really exciting for a Fisker Ocean, but can it actually happen? We have to wait and see. I think the good news there is that American Lease has a bunch of these cars and they really want them because Uber drivers really need that kind of stuff. It's a night and day experience between having to use your phone and an interface or having the interface use your phone. So I really hope that happens, but once again, additional cost for the owners. Owners themselves are saying you have to have thick skin.
Some of us have had to develop thick skin to weather the fallout of this epic fiasco.
Which is basically an admittance of an extremely high risk. Because that's what this is. The Fisker Ocean is an extremely high risk. That's to get into. If you own one, it's different. The longer you own it and successfully drive it, the more risk you've been able to back out of, especially if you measure risk by number of dollars. Yes, I took a big risk by getting rid of my Ocean, but I also completely capped that risk in number of dollars permanently forever. If telling me I made a mistake by setting the last day I throw money at this car to be 5/8/24 helps you with your risk management strategy, I'm more than happy to help. And if you don't think that there's a high risk, literally look at the values. The values say it all. Staying in means throwing more money, buying a key fob, buying a battery tender, all the switches and gadgets and extras that you'll need, including time, but we'll get into that. The car company was an epic fiasco.
Epic fiasco.
Yeah, that one speaks for itself. It's totally true. You have to start the conversation about your Ocean to someone asking you about it with, oh, by the way, yes, this was an epic fiasco. Or you can lie. Putting a little more money to save what we have left is more prudent. How much is a little more money?
Little
If you already have a $1,000 payment, which most owners do, remember, almost half of the Oceans were Ocean Ones, and all of those people paid $70,000, and a lot of those people can't get out. And when they win their arbitrations, if they win, they will definitely get out. A little extra money to somebody who already owes a whole bunch of money and cannot get it back is asking a lot. I currently have a $1,000 car payment for my Honda Prologue. Part of the reason for that is I had to finance 100% of it and roll my loss into my loan for the Prologue. Yes, Prologues have lost a lot of value, but name an EV that hasn't. In fact, well, you can. It's the Tesla Model Y. In this category, the Tesla Model Y does not lose a lot of value. I sold my Tesla Model Y 2021 for $30,000. That was the amount of money that Carvana gave me. And a brand new one right now is $36,000. So if you're buying a Model Y for $36,000, you can probably expect to not lose very much money. And once again, if money isn't an issue, the Fisker Ocean might be a fun thing to get into. It's like the best, coolest car club of any car club that started in the last, 2 decades. Like, what else is there? The Chrysler Crossfire? I saw a meetup recently in Pittsburgh. There was a Chrysler Crossfire meetup. There were like 30 cars there. It looked like a pretty cool deal. But Chrysler Crossfires don't make the news, you know? The Fisker Ocean, as far as a story, kind of has it all. The bankruptcy, cool features, the partly functional but definitely bespoke stuff, the awesomeness of California mode, the gimmickiness of the solar roof. It's got it all. And there's definitely a social opportunity in the FOA. It's a car club with a $20,000 entry fee and a $50 a month membership. So it will become as exclusive as Henrik Fisker promised it would be. So if he did honor any promises, I guess there is that one. It's going to end up being a really, really exclusive automobile. And one of the reasons I'll never go back in is I can't afford to bleed out that way. If I decide to own a car for 5 years, which as an EV reviewer with a wife who also drives a ton, is tough to kind of fathom anyway. But if I do own a car for 5 years, I want every year after those 5 years to be extremely financially beneficial for me. And I don't see that with the Fisker Ocean. Every time something goes wrong, there's going to be a massive cost. I have to work to find somebody to fix it. I have to make sure it gets to where that is, which could be far away. And then on top of that, I have to pay somebody who knows how to do it. And those prices could be reasonable or they might not, depending on who you're able to get it to and how busy they are. And on top of that, you have to kind of accept whatever time period it takes to fix that car. This is not a daily driver. And if it is for you, eventually it won't be. By definition, risk is the possibility of something bad happening if you're a good risk manager. You'll also know about the risk matrix, which includes possible outcomes and impacts of the bad thing happening, as well as the probability of it happening. My wife told me I made a mistake, and we like to believe what each other say. When I say something is financially sound and a good idea, she accepts that until there's proof that it isn't. And there was definitely proof here that it isn't. Just like if she says, I really need to buy this or that for the house, we're going to go ahead with that. So when my wife told me it was a horrible mistake, I am now creating a gap in my personal relationships for the sake of this car.
To weather the fallout of this epic fiasco.
And if you haven't had to sacrifice any of your personal relationships for the sake of this car, I commend you for an excellent job. Here are some arguments for the Fisker Ocean, and I'll offer both sides of the coin. I bought the Fisker Ocean for the 360-mile range. That's great. It really can achieve 360 miles of range. If you drive it slow enough and the temperature outside is kind enough, you can definitely get 360 miles out of that battery in the Fisker Ocean. But I just took a road trip with Matt in the Ioniq 5N, and his car has 221 miles of range, and we were in an EV desert, kind of. There weren't a ton of options for where to charge, but he was able to navigate that entire trip with 221 miles of range without ever going below 20%. So 360 miles of range is cool, but if you don't live in Montana or Nebraska or South Dakota, do you really need that much? The answer is no. And like I say, the reason I did that video, which is right here, was to prove that. No, you don't need 360 miles of range. And if your counter to that is, well, I drive all the time, well, then you're really going to miss the adaptive cruise, because the Ocean doesn't have adaptive cruise, and it never will. You're not going to get adaptive cruise control. That's like a Honda Civic feature. I don't know if the base model Nissan Versa comes with it, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a vehicle today that says 2024 or 2025 that doesn't have adaptive cruise. And that's a safety issue if you drive a lot. It makes the Ocean one of the most dangerous 2020 era cars that there is. because it doesn't have that safety feature. I have road tripped my Honda Prologue for about 6,000 of my 6,700 miles that are on it so far, and having the supercharger network available has become completely liberating. I don't have any problems, any questions, any reservations going anywhere, and I live in the largest EV desert east of the Mississippi. And unless Tesla decides to just grant Fisker a license because they're nice, which I don't see that happening, or the FOA decides democratically to give Elon Musk a whole bunch of money, which somehow I don't think that's going to happen either, the Fisker Ocean will never be able to use the supercharger network. And one of the main reasons why the EV infrastructure isn't a big deal anymore can be said is the fact that most auto manufacturers by next year are going to have access to the supercharger network. And if you're in the camp of, I don't want to give Elon Musk any money, I totally get that. But how can you say that and then in the same token want to give the creator of the Dieselgate scandal money? EVgo, that's a GM product. GM sues the government every time there are regulations on fuel consumption. There's no real good answer here as far as ethics when it comes to charging. This is another big one for me. The FOA is disincentivized from telling you the truth. Let me explain. The whole thing is a balancing act. It's a game of how much good news can we wrap around this problem so it doesn't look like a problem, but still communicate that it exists, not necessarily as a problem, but the issue does exist. And how long do we wait before we disclose it to everyone? Maybe there's a reply to a reply to a reply to a thread of comments somewhere, but it's not an official communication. This is the reality of a club. And this is also what I was going to get to about time. In order to be in the know and up to date, not only do you have to go to the meetings and pay the money, but you also have to be involved in all of the discourse, on all of the threads, and all of the places, all of the time. Or you'll miss something important and you'll be last in line for something you need. If one person has too much power, that's a problem. Conversely, if the power of one person's voice isn't powerful enough, that's also a problem. You can't control the truth without building an extremely complex hierarchy of power. This schedule of disclosure, or this veil or gray area, or whatever you want to call it, between the actual truth and what is in the best interest of the FOA to disclose, living in that gray area creates anxiety and eventually burnout. The bottom line is this. If you want a Fisker Ocean, it's expensive to join the club. There's dues that you constantly have to pay. There are extra expenses that are going to pop up at any time. There is a massive risk bigger than that of the ownership of any modern car on top of all of that additional expense. And as a result, you get to be part of a cool club where you can say that you and your fellow owners own the company. If you don't like what's going on, you can speak up about it. But that may hurt your ability to get things done later, because at the end of the day, that's how humans are. If it's between you and someone who's never made a comment that's negative or derogatory, guess what? You're probably not going to get that first opportunity, no matter what it is. New software, an update, a part, a service appointment. Finally, if you lost 5 figures, let's say, on the stock, do you want a reminder of that mistake every single time you drive? I didn't even invest in Fisker, and I still don't want that. My final thought is this. I've had a lot of interactions with a lot of Fisker Ocean owners, and it's been really positive overall. But there have been a few that have not only damaged me emotionally, but been kind of negatively impactful on the way I think about people. And I've been in many clubs before. I've been vice president of associations and on the board of directors for different clubs at different levels and different places. And honestly, I'm not about that life. I think that Fisker Ocean owners overall are like-minded. They have great ideas about things. They're smart. They're responsive. They're obsessed with this vehicle. And all of those are great things. But I want my experience in a club to be extremely positive. And if you haven't had anxiety from owning your Fisker Ocean, I think that's wonderful. I really did. And that's why I don't want to go back. There are great, legitimate, specific, exact, and reasonable arguments to want to own this car and like it and continue to own it as long as possible. Do I recommend it? It's all about who you are. If you have enough money to dedicate to a hobby and you want the Fisker Ocean to be your hobby, that's the reason you get it. Everyone else should make the best of the situation they're in, at least for now. So that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me down below. By the way, this is how the EV80 Kit shirt looks. You can get 25% off for a short period of time at this point. Check it out at ev80kit.com. What did I miss? What did I get wrong? Why did you keep your ocean? Or why do you want to get out? Join Patreon or become a YouTube member for early access to videos. Subscribe for more. We'll see you on the next one.
Hey, smash the like button.
Thank you.
Little morning, little morning, little